I'm Sarah Faxon, author and creative warrior, and today we're going to be interviewing my dear friend and fellow semi-sage, Theresa Halvorsen. Now, I just released a video regarding her book, Warehouse Dreams, which is coming soon, so definitely keep an eye out for that. If you haven't seen that video yet, be sure to check it out before or after the rest of this video here. Theresa is a fantastic writer. She is my novel saver or manuscript saver. And I just want to take a minute to welcome you to the show here today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really happy to take this chance to talk about Warehouse Dreams and to be interviewed by one of my favorite authors.
Thank you. So there's obviously, we've known each other now since October of 2019. And we four are constantly saying how, it feels like we've been friends for years. We just clicked instantly and formed this bond and became the semi-sages almost overnight, or pretty much what felt like overnight. And one of our biggest missions is to help fellow authors on their journey through the experiences that we have endured or shared with each other. And so one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight is the experience of editing, which is so important and so often gets skipped over, but be sure to stay tuned to the end because that's when it's coming. Now, Theresa, I hear, and I am very aware of the fact that you have a book coming out.
I do.
So tell us a bit about Warehouse Dreams.
Okay, so Warehouse Dreams is a soft sci-fi romance, and it's about the faculty at a school for teenage psychokinetics and telepaths. These kids are called wilds. And so imagine you're sitting at dinner with your teenager, and suddenly your teenager says, "Oh, you got in trouble at work. Are you going to get fired? Are we going to lose our home?" And you're thinking to yourself, wait, how did they, oh no, they're reading my mind. And you're just sitting there going, oh my gosh, my child can read my mind. Or you're having that conversation around the dinner table of like, I don't care whose turn it is to do the litter box. I've just told you 200 times to do the litter box and I need you to do it. And then a fork jumps off the table and embeds itself in the wall next to you. And your teenager's like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to do that. So what do you do with these kids? What do you do when the school calls and says, we don't have the resources for these kids? They're going to cheat on exams. They're reading my thoughts. I mean, who do we really want people reading our thoughts? No, no way. School coaches say, I can't have your child on the team anymore. They're going to cheat because they can manipulate the ball. So what do you do? And some families are going to go ahead and move or homeschool or tell their child not to use their abilities. But other families, let's be honest, are going to throw their kids out on the streets. They're going to turn them into a special force called the Guardians. And then those kids get institutionalized. They get locked up for their safety, of course, and basically forgotten about. So this school that the book is based around is that beacon of hope for these children. And it's called Phillips Academy for the Advancement of Wilds. It's a terrible name. So they've nicknamed it the Warehouse because it's in a bunch of converted warehouses. So the book is about the faculty. Now there's another group of people in the society and they're called Breads. And they're people whose parents paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to create a perfect genetic code for their child. So you want your child to be physically beautiful, to have athletic skills, to be super intelligent, to be a leader. Just costs a little bit extra for that. And then these families also added psychokinesis and telepathy to that as well. So these adults and some, these kids as well are trying to meet their parental expectations of you shall be a doctor. I coded your genetic code for you to be a doctor. And some of these adults are now starting to say, but I don't want that. And I really love this. One of my characters, Stephen, is so physically beautiful that my main characters, she says that her mind stutters in his presence. She can't think of anything else except how physically attractive he is. And he hates that. He hates walking around with people not even able, I mean, they're just staring at him like, huh? And nobody listens to him. Nobody can talk to him unless thinking about how attractive he is. So it's really playing around with that world, that idea of you can't help who you're born to and you can't help your genetic code.
And then it also sort of ties into meeting your family's expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so many of us have, our general expectations from our parents where they want us to succeed. And of course they want us all to be doctors. But when you're genetically programmed to be this way, what choice do you have? And that's something that a lot of your characters are exploring and really fighting against, which, rings true to so many different themes. And there were so many themes in your book that even though this is a spec fiction, science fiction sort of feel to it or genre, there were so many characters and moments that I identified with. And, from, just thinking about your characters who are overworked, underpaid, and all of that, to the major themes of the book where we're questioning how far do we go? I mean, we've all seen on the news the opportunities that are arising. I don't know if opportunities is the right word, to begin to genetically manipulate children, where there's science coming out where you can determine which sex you want the baby to be, or, if you want them to have these traits or these traits. Can you talk a bit, was that what you were seeing in the news? Was that sort of the inspiration behind this genetic manipulation?
I think a little bit it was. It's also about, as a mom, of course, I have expectations for my children. I have hopes and I have dreams for them. And as much as I say, and I do genuinely believe this, that I just want you to be a productive member of society in whatever way you choose that to be. Of course, there's a selfish part of me that says, and, be a doctor and be financially stable and, be part of society. And you don't mean to, but you do set those expectations upon your children. So how far do you go? And we're seeing that now in society as well, with these children that are overscheduled. They've got piano at 3:00. They have soccer at 4:00. They have basket weaving at 6:00. They have violin at 7:00. And they're starting their homework at 10:00 at night, exhausted, and then having to get straight A's at school. And that's the expectation, because if they don't do that, they will not be quote unquote successful. And so this is just taking it to that next level of, I paid a tremendous amount of money to have a perfect child, so you darn well better be perfect, and you darn well better do what I have expected you to do. And what are the repercussions of that? What are we doing to our children and to our adults as well?
Which is very much a part of the book is, this takes place at a school, but it is told from the perspective of the adults. And I really appreciated how there were a couple of quasi Harry Potter references in there. I thought that was amazing. But it really does come from the more mature perspective of, this is not okay, and this is why. So, those were some very interesting points that were brought up. And it wasn't just the rebellious, no, I don't want to do what my parents say. It was from a very mature age perspective of, this is not okay because I have to deal with this, this, and this. And big parts of those issues that are arising are the discrimination.
Right.
And that's a huge part of the book. And we get thrown into all these incredibly intense situations with Kendall, the main character, who is just trying to shepherd children who are deemed undesirable by society to this school, and meets challenge after challenge after challenge. And so the question is constantly arising, then what do you want us to do with these kids?
Right. They're there are, you and I are not psychokinetics and telepaths. So I know, right? There are children. These are our children, but the idea that my child could read my thoughts, and it's uncontrolled. That's the other thing about these teenagers, is that the warehouse teaches them control, teaches them how to use their abilities. And when you have somebody in your house that can read your mind or can inadvertently blow up a building because they're so out of control, and they're teenagers. I mean, teenagers are out of control anyways.
Right. Like, it's not hard enough being a teenager.
What do you do with your child? What is the best thing? And then what does society do with those children as well? And that's what they're trying to deal with, is this idea of we don't, and that's the thing, nobody wants to deal with them. And so that's where the discrimination comes in of, it's not our problem, it's somebody else's problem. And the warehouse is just trying to fill in that gap and just trying to give some hope for a future, even though they know that the majority of their kids when they graduate are going to have a lot of difficulty succeeding. And we do see some echoes of that as well, in some of the homeless population that's surrounding the warehouse. Their graduates are homeless, living on the streets around the warehouse because they have no place to go. So we see some of that as well.
I think one of the interesting points that you made there was about hope. And I think one of the most beautiful scenes in the book is where Kendall's reflecting on the mural of hummingbirds. And hummingbirds are interplayed throughout this story. Do you want to talk a bit about the symbolism of the hummingbirds that is on your cover?
So hummingbirds are a symbol of hope. They're one of the only birds that actually hibernate in the winter. And so they're seen as a rebirth, as hope. And the Warehouse Dreams is very dark, and I really wanted that symbol throughout, because that's what the warehouse is trying to provide hope. My main character, Kendall, she works 60, 70 hours a week. She is damaged. She was damaged by a very, very challenging life. And she's just trying everything she can to try to give some hope to these kids, try to give some hope to the school, try to keep the school open. It's at constant risk of closing due to a variety of reasons, both related to the children and then also financial issues as well. So I really wanted that element of hope throughout. Additionally, it is a romance as well. She does get the opportunity to fall in love. And I wanted that feeling too, of together we have this hope for a future. And that's the symbol of the hummingbird.
Wow, that was a really great description of it all. I was telling Theresa before we started the interview that in my book review, I didn't even get to the romance because there's just such amazing, beautiful themes throughout this story. There's really something in it for everyone. So when Warehouse Dreams comes out, definitely order it or pre-order it, which I believe will be an upcoming opportunity. So definitely follow Theresa for that. Now, another thing that Theresa and I are involved with, as I mentioned in the beginning, is the group, the Semi-Sages of the Pages, which is our writing podcast. Now, one of the things that we are constantly talking about is this theme of editing, and how we have found so many different times where someone will say, yay, I finished my book. It's time for it to go online on Amazon or to be published. Here, publishing world, take this. And we were at a conference and this question arose where, congratulations, you just finished your draft. Now go get it published. And Theresa and I were both like, there are several steps that need to happen before we go from finishing the draft to being published. And, this is something that bothers us because we know so many authors who didn't have this moment or this one person say, hey, maybe you should get it looked at professionally or by your friends or by whoever to take a second look at it. So Theresa, you want to talk a little bit about why we call you our Manuscript Saver?
So Warehouse Dreams probably went through, well, I'm going to take that back. So I actually wrote a different version of Warehouse Dreams probably about 15 years ago. And about 2 years ago, I pulled it back out, dusted it off, and said, wow, this is terrible. And pretty much kept the characters' names and the idea of a school for psychokinetics and telepaths, and destroyed everything else. And then I really sat down and hardcore rewrote it and plotted it out. And it probably went through about 15 drafts before I sent it to some beta readers who had some really, really great advice for it. And then I did another probably 2 or 3 drafts. And then I said, all right, it's 134,000 words. I'm going to La Jolla Writers Conference, and I'm going to hope to get an agent. And I did have an agent that was kind of interested in it, but he said, it's way too long. You got to get it down. So I trimmed it down to about 108,000 words, and sent it back out to a couple of people. A couple more suggestions were made on it. I got it down to 98,000 words. And then I started sending it out to agents and publishers, and it got picked up by S&H Publishing. And then with S&H, it has gone through 4 more revisions. And I got the galley proofs the other day. I actually had to send them back because there were some errors in there. And I sent them back and I said, well, we got a little bit more fixing to do. And then I will have one more edit on top of that, because I'm going to do another read through and just make sure it's as perfect as it possibly can be. So probably at the end of the day, mid-20s on drafts. And that's for a book that has gone through a publisher. That's not something I self-published.
And that's, just think about that number for a second. I mean, it's incredible what it's taken to produce this book professionally. And whether you self-publish or you have a book done professionally, take the time to get those edits done. Mm-hmm. That was advice I didn't have, which is why Animal Court wasn't as great as it could be, until I gave it over to Theresa, and now she's gone through and done a marvelous job of pointing out things. And there were so many times where I was like, wow, that was really dumb. Why did I put that like that? But it takes a second person, at least one other person, to point out things that you may not have noticed, because the story for you exists in here and in here, and it's been with you probably more than a couple of days. So you know all the different nuances, you know all the characters inside and out, which is why it's so important to get someone else to read it, to point out to you any flaws, or why did you use this word 17 times in a paragraph? Those are the things that we kind of go blind to, which is why it's so important to have other eyes, other editors to go through and check your manuscript before it goes out, so it can be more successful, so it can be more broadly accepted. One of the worst things that I've encountered, or some of the worst criticisms I've seen so far, is who edited this? Mm-hmm. Why didn't this get edited? And it's obvious. So, I think it's sort of a mutual bit of advice between the pair of us is get your manuscripts checked before you do go to the shelves.
And I can tell you, as many drafts as I did with Warehouse Dreams, it was probably 2 drafts ago that I caught that one of the minor characters' last names changed.
Oh.
And nobody had caught that. No beta readers had caught that. The publisher hadn't caught that. I caught that reading it through, and I went, wait a minute. And then I also caught that my buildings changed the number of floors that they had. I caught that twice. Huh. And that was just me, in the moment being like, I'm sure it's 4 stories. And it wasn't, it was 3. So that was, again, that was a huge catch. And I'm really glad I caught that, which is why it's so important that you read it and you double check, and you don't just read it and fall into that world. You really, really read the language that you have chosen and make sure that it is exactly what you want it to say.
Well, nicely said, Theresa. And folks, if you want to check out Theresa's work, be sure to visit her website. The link will be below in the description. I'll probably have it flashing here along the screen as well. Theresa is also very active on Twitter, so be sure to follow her there. Again, the link will be in the description below. And be sure to check us out on the Semi-Sages of the Pages website, which is www.semisagesofthepages.com. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. so that you can be in on the latest author interviews, writing tips, and behind the pen and the pages as they come along. Again, Theresa, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today, and cheers to you.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.